Happy International Women's Day. And what an amazing day to come on my podcast. I'm going to introduce you in a minute, but the reason why I do Heal with the Real is just due to domestic abuse in my past, and I ended up writing the book Fix Your Future. And what Fix Your Future was about was my healing journey, and what I came to realize was I'd never really healed from domestic abuse that had happened a long time ago. And I was always looking externally for love instead of looking internally. So I went away and I did all that work, that healing work that I needed to do. But I wrote my book, Fix Your Future, and I wrote in the back of the book all the healing tools that I personally use. So that's my book, and that's the reason why I do Heal with the Real. And I interview every week amazing women who have gone from trauma to triumph or have worked in domestic abuse, and supporting women and children, to understand what coercive control is. So my guest tonight is Rie Pearson. Do you want to introduce yourself? Just say a little bit about where you're from and your background.
Right, okay. Hello, everybody, and thank you for watching. I'm Rie. I am the founder of a community interest company called Be Kind, No Excuses. I have a book called Be Kind, No Excuses. I'm a retired police officer. I'm married to my third husband because my band of acceptability is very narrow because of my background around working with victims and with perpetrators of domestic abuse. So my husband, there's no gender gap in this house at all. I've got 3 grown-up children. One of them still lives with me because he's at college, and a little dog. And we live at the seaside. We live in a lovely town on the northeast coast called Whitley Bay.
Nice.
So I'm literally about 30 yards away from the sea. So when I was 6 years old, my dad brought me down to the coast because we lived in Washington, which is about 12 miles over there. Yeah. Washington was a new town in the 70s. It was all growing and growing and growing. And he brought me to the coast one weekend. I remember it vividly because I got in the car. I was in the back of the car and we got to the seafront, and I was like, when I'm a big girl, I'm going to live here. So I do.
Wow. Isn't it funny how you can manifest those things even that young?
Yeah. I was like, wow, it was just beautiful. It's a beautiful coastline. The northeast is a beautiful coastline. And also I love, because, oh gosh, when I look at the sea, if you stand on the edge, because I call myself a lady on the edge, if you stand on the edge and look at the sea and you can't see anything around behind you, you could be anywhere in time, because that's a constant.
Yeah.
So it could be 1705, it could be 1066, it could be, a million years ago, because the sea is a constant, isn't it? And I actually find that very grounding. It connects me with my ancestors.
Yeah, it's that ebb and flow, isn't it? That constant ebb and flow. It's
the energy is amazing. I'm very respectful.
Yeah. It just does something for you, doesn't it? Even being by the sea, it's a wonderful place. And I go to the sands down there. I'm just trying to think of the place. It'll come to me, but they're really golden sands and sand dunes around Washington area. Some beautiful beaches along that coastline.
Yeah, Beadnell, Bamborough, all the way up, and there are castles, and it is absolutely beautiful. I do love living here.
Nice.
If it was just hot, more.
Yeah.
It was 31 degrees this summer, but yay, global warming.
Yeah.
Because that's not normal. Like, I've been here 30 years now.
Wow.
I've lived in this. I've worked my way to the seafront from buying a property up there, and then I got into town and then sort of got closer and closer to the edge. But 30 degrees is not normal for this, global warming is real. Oh my God, how scary.
Yeah. So tell me a bit about your background in policing. What was that like?
Oh, well, it's like any other. Well, I suppose it's not like any other job, is it?
No.
It's mad. It's actually a mad job. What happened with the police? I was working in a factory. I got married very young, and I was working in a factory, and I wasn't very happy, and I was bored because I'm a bit like, I've got ME at the minute, but when I'm not I'm a bit like Tigger, you know, like from Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
Doing, 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 doing everything. But I was a bit bored, and I was coming back from work, and I lived in a place called Bensham in Gateside, which has a really big Jewish community. So Friday afternoon in Bensham is crazy busy. It's great. There's little shops and people are running around because they're preparing for the Sabbath. And it was a sunny July day, and I'm sitting on a bus, and the bus is sitting in traffic on my way home, and I'm in Bensham on this bus. And I was like, I'm really bored, but I loved where I lived because the hustle and bustle of it on a Friday was great. Yeah. But there was a bakery, and there was a police car, a Panda police car, little police car, parked on double yellow lines outside the bakery on a Friday afternoon. And two female police officers walked out, and they had, I don't know, whatever they had in their hands, in like pies and cakes and stuff. And they were laughing. These two officers were laughing really, really hard. And I thought, I could do that. I can laugh for a living and eat pies and cake. You know, that's fine. I'll do that. But my friend Janet, who lives in Holland, she had a place just down the road from me. We've been friends for a long time. She moved out to Holland. But on a Thursday night, the local evening paper, and this is before the internet, right? I'm talking like, well, maybe the internet was around, but we didn't have access to it. Yeah. The local evening paper used to have a job section.
Yeah, I remember.
And we were really naughty, actually. We used to look at the job. We used to get, oh my God, we used to get a couple of bottles of wine on a Thursday night and drink and go through the job section and apply for jobs we thought were like fancied having a look at.
Okay.
Not really, like just to see. And there was one of them, because I wanted to know, you know, how, you know, these long finger biscuits with chocolate on the end, on each end. I wanted to know how they got the chocolate on each end. So I actually applied for a job at Northumbria Fine Foods and got an interview so I could go and have a look in the factory. And I did get the job, actually. Okay. And then I had to say, I'm sorry, no, thank you. But that Friday, I saw these two police officers coming out of the bakery laughing. I was like, that's for me. And on the following Thursday, Northumbria Police were advertising in that job section. So I applied. So it's their fault. They know who they are. So I ended up applying for the job. I had no idea what was going on. Never been in a police station in my life.
Wow.
I'd never even had a conversation with a police officer. I didn't know any.
How old were you then?
I was 22.
Okay.
So I was 21. I was 21 at that time. And
Yeah.
by the time I got through the application process and the fitness tests and the eye tests and everything else tests that they used to do back then, I got in, I was 22.
Wow. So how did you work your way up to become safeguarding? And
oh no, I was never promoted.
So you went straight into that job?
When you start the police, you start as a police constable and you're in uniform.
Yeah.
You do a length of time. When I started, you went in, you did 2 years in what you call a probationary period, where they could sack you at any time. To be honest, I didn't know what I was doing till I got about 5 years in, because everything happens every day is different.
Yeah.
And I actually remember the moment when I walked into the police station at Gateshead, and I had the radio, and the control room said, I've got a job. Is anybody available for a job? And they didn't say, because they never used to say what the job was. They used to wait for the sucker to say, I'll do it. And then they'd tell you, and it'd be like, oh God. So they shouted up. I remember the moment they shouted up as a job. I had 5 years service in, and I thought, whatever he says, I can do it. Doesn't matter what it is, I can do it. But I had 5 years in.
Okay.
So the first 2 years, I was just basically not being killed. But after that, I was kind of learning.
Yeah.
But it does take a long time for you to get through that process. That was what the process was then.
Right. Okay.
So I was in uniform for about 9 years. And then I started looking around for different things. So I was working this out a couple of weeks ago. I said to my friend, probably I had about 12 or 13 different jobs in the time that I was in the police.
Wow.
But I never got promoted because I got married. I went reduced hours, which was hadn't happened actually. My boss just assumed that I was going to quit. And actually said to me, which would not happen these days, said to me, "Oh, you should stay at home and look after your baby." Can you imagine a superintendent getting away with that now? Wouldn't get away with it. There would be hell on, wouldn't there be? Frontline on the head, Daily Telegraph. It was assumed that, and there weren't that many female officers then.
And I'm guessing, would it be hard even to get a promotion as a woman?
No, it's not hard. But I got married. I had my 2 kids. When I had my eldest child, I went reduced hours because there was a female officer who was a chief inspector at the time. So she's like that much rank above me. And she was having her babies at the time and she didn't want to quit either. So she persuaded the proper management, to let officers go reduced hours. So in my first maternity, because I took like 9 months off or something.
Yeah.
During that 9-month period, I was very fortunate because that chief inspector happened to manage to get the boss to let Northumbria police officers go reduced hours. So I came back on 20 hours.
Wow.
Instead of the full thing. And I was given a day job as well. They were very accommodating. But I never got promoted because I had another baby. And then my marriage went pear-shaped because I started working in the field of domestic abuse.
Okay.
And then I was
So how did that happen? How did you suddenly become?
Oh, okay. That's another story. It used to be, I'm going to talk in like early to mid 90s. And people would phone the police, bearing in mind that most calls for domestic abuse are arguments, maybe a breach of the peace and a common assault, or a combination of those things. And at that time, the legislation did not allow police officers to arrest for common assault.
Mm.
It didn't have a power of arrest. So cops would get there and it would be like, well, what would we do? We'll take him to his mum's. Yeah. But then they decided that they would have somebody contact the victim, which was usually a woman, the day after, and say, "Don't worry, pet, everything will be all right." Or words to that effect, depending where you are in the country. Okay. Yeah. That was the Northumbria version.
That was also this version in West Yorkshire as well.
Yeah. And actually West Yorkshire and Northumbria are actually very similar. They're actually in the same family of forces. Okay. Along with Greater Manchester, they're all like quite similar. Yeah. Anyway, so it was usually the pregnant policewoman, because once you got pregnant, you weren't allowed to go out. So they had to give you a job in the police station. And at that time, the pregnant policewoman it wasn't me, it was another lady. And she wasn't having a very good time with her pregnancy. She was very poorly. And just as she called in sick one day, I was walking past the boss's office. So the boss called me in and he said, "Jane's not very well. You need to do her job." And I was horrified. I was like, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. I'm kicking doors in. I'm chasing burglars. There's car crime. I was chasing cars in the middle of the night, all that. I'm not doing that. I'm not ringing people. I'm here to catch the bad guys. I'm not doing the pink and fluffy victim stuff. I'm not putting my arm around somebody and saying, don't worry, it's going to be fine, pet, when I knew fine well that she would be phoning us again, or our next door neighbour would be phoning us again the following weekend. I'm not doing that. Give me I said, right, because he said, like, yes, you are. And I was like, no, I'm not. And it was like pantomime. Oh, yes, you are. Oh, no, I'm not. Oh, yes, you are. Oh, no, I'm not. And then eventually I went, well, you're the boss. I'm supposed to I have to, because the police is basically the biggest pyramid scheme, isn't it? The king's at the top, and I was at the bottom, right? So I said to my boss, right, give me a proper job to do, because I'm not doing the pink and fluffy stuff. I'm not. So he said, right, I want you, because obviously the repeat calls aren't always crime, but they're resource intensive.
Yeah.
So the repeat calls, he said, I want you to find a way to reduce them. There was no mention of safeguarding. There was no mention of repeat victimization. I mean, safeguarding wasn't even a word.
No.
I don't think it was. Certainly I hadn't heard of it.
No.
It wasn't a thing. There was no conversation about keeping people safe, reducing danger. That wasn't the part. That wasn't the gig. The gig was, I don't want the cops going to these houses all the time because they're taking up too much of our resource time.
Wow.
That was the truth. That was the truth.
Yeah.
Just fair enough. So I was like, okay. So that's how I got the job. And what I did was I looked at the calls where the majority of calls were coming from. I established the ones that were most resource intensive. And then I obviously through digging through it, realized that 70% of the offenders, the perpetrators of domestic violence, were actually offenders of other crime anyway.
Right, okay.
They were already known to the police for other things that weren't domestic abuse related.
That's interesting.
So what I did was I got the boss to buy me a whiteboard and put it under the clock in the briefing room, because I knew in the briefings, when you go on duty as a police officer who's in uniform, you go into a room and they tell you what's happened, what's happening today, what your job is. Like, oh, I've got somebody, there's such and such is in the cells, you're interviewing them, you're driving the car in that area, you're driving the car in that area, you've got paperwork to do, so you're stopping in, like everything's allocated. And it gets really boring. So everybody looks at the clock, because if you look at your watch, you get shouted at, you know what I mean? So I put the whiteboard under the clock. I got the handyman, put the whiteboard under the clock. And what I did is I established a top 10. And the cops really bought into it, actually, because they were arresting people for things other than domestic abuse, which meant that the domestic abuse calls went down, and it didn't have anything to do with the family. It was for other crime. So a lot of people were getting remanded into custody. So that gave the family a respite, even if it was just for 7 days.
Yeah.
And that's how it started, really.
And things have massively changed now. I mean, I remember calling a police officer, and probably similar era that you're talking about, you know, there wasn't safeguarding. I eventually got special locks on my window.
Yeah.
That was something that they did for me. But I got an officer come one time who was just terrible, and he wasn't trained at all, and kind of made me feel like I was at fault.
Yeah.
And I just was like, well, I rang them the next day and I said, please don't, whatever you do, send that officer again.
Yeah.
But whereas nowadays, you know, they're trained around domestic abuse, aren't they? And there's so much more in place to support women. But in those days, like you say, it was, you know, tell them, you know, what can you do? And all they said to me was, well, we can't prove it. We can't prove anything. So you were just like kind of left like a sitting duck.
Yeah. I used to, because I think even going back before that, you know, I always had like this kind of spidey sense going on. But I was really fortunate, because at the time in the area that I was working in, And also I had a really good boss. He was lovely,
Yeah.
very understanding. And also I'm really bolshy and I get what I want. And at the time, there was an organisation set up in Gateshead, which was where I was working. I was working in the Wickham end. It was divided into different areas. It's all different now. And they got lottery funding, I think, in the council for a holistic approach to domestic abuse. So they had set up a team. Some of the team looked at perpetrators, some looked at victims, and some of the team actually looked at children. And I think that was the first one in the country, in England and Wales at least.
Wow.
To be more holistic.
You remember what year that was?
97 maybe.
Okay. Wow.
It was called the Safer Families Project.
Okay.
So we had, and I'd gone on some training because Gateshead were really good at being Gateshead Council were really good about being at the forefront of domestic abuse stuff.
Yeah.
Because I found like 70% of the people who were 70% of the men who were involved in the calls to the police. Because bearing in mind, there's like this much domestic abuse, and there's like this much of it gets phoned into the busies.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so it's like a massive thing, this much for the police. But 70% of that was other crime related. So we could deal with that 70% in a different way, in a more targeted way.
Yeah.
The other 30%, I was like, well, we need a multi-agency approach.
Yeah.
And Gateshead had a fantastic victim support service, absolutely gold star. And they had then got this Safer Families project set up. So there was a lot going on.
Yeah.
And it all became the multi-agency public protection stuff, because that evolved while I was in that sphere at the time. There was so much going. I walked past that chief inspector's office and I thought, I just don't want this job. But actually, the universe wanted me there, and I was in the right place at the right time. Because I ended up working on home office projects. I ended up doing, the DASH model that they use.
Okay.
I worked on the project to develop the DASH.
Tell us about the DASH. What is?
Well, it's the domestic abuse, stalking, and harassment. You know, when you get when you get an incident, organisations fill in the DASH model so they can assess you whether you're high, medium, or low risk.
Okay.
And if you're high risk, you get referred into the MARIC process.
Yeah.
So I was part of the DASH, what I call it, working party. So I was going down to the Met every few weeks, and I was the only police constable. Everybody else was a chief inspector or above.
Amazing.
I was just in the right place at the right time. I was working with Home Office professors on domestic abuse research.
Wow. It seems from what you're telling me, even right back to your young days, you wanted to live by the sea. Then you fell into the police because you saw these ladies with the books.
Because they were laughing.
And then you've fallen into this job. And now tell us I'd love to know about lockdown, because lockdown was a massive issue for women that had nowhere to go. They were locked down with their perpetrators and had nowhere to go. So domestic abuse was massive.
And you know what? The government put us in lockdown and never give a thought to that.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if you're a child, school, if you're living in an abusive family, school is your refuge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can't go to school.
Yeah.
So we were talking earlier about mental health and how childhood brain development has been affected by not having the socialization that we normally go when we go to school and we do the things outside of school. And we have actually, and this is global pretty much, set ourselves up to be dealing with the mental health issues of our teenagers now.
Huge. Mental health at the minute is just at the forefront. It's huge.
So then you have these women who couldn't go to work, or sometimes for some people, I know people will be watching this who are like, really, is it that bad? It is, and I would love to swear because I swear a lot. It is that bad. It is worse. It's worse than you imagine.
Yeah. And there's just so many children that just won't go to school because they're just affected socially.
Because they've got anxiety.
Yeah.
Because they haven't gone through that process of childhood brain development, that socialization of it.
Yeah.
We've just set ourselves up for a massive task with
Yeah.
that. And I guess the lockdown was on some level necessary, but only because I don't want to get political.
Yeah, I mean, I've got my own views at the moment. Currently, I've got my own views around that at the moment, which is probably I'm thinking that what was lockdown. Did we really need to do that?
Well, only because we didn't have enough doctors and nurses to care for the people who got ill. It wasn't about the numbers who got ill. It was not actually being able to look after the numbers that got ill, because when they say a hospital is full, and I have personal experience of this, okay? I've got 3 kids and me and my husband. When they say the hospital is full, it doesn't mean the beds are full. It means they only have enough staff to deal with so many patients. So you can go into a hospital ward, the doctors have said the hospital's full, but there are only 2 beds taken in that ward, but there are actually 6 beds in that ward, but 4 of them are empty because they don't have the staff.
Yeah. Well, they were so
which is a government strategy.
They were so overworked. It was just horrendous, wasn't it?
Insane.
So tell me about what you began in lockdown to support.
Okay.
Well,
I've always, because I was a single mum for a long time. I mean, I am married now, but I had 3 small children and I had a full-time job. But where I live, I live on the seaside. Do you know how much kayaks cost? They cost a lot of money. And, even the paddles, they're probably about £200 now.
Oh wow! You can buy the blow up ones. How much are they? They're not that.
I don't think that counts.
I want to blow
imagine my son going, "Yeah, I'll have an inflatable." No.
Yeah.
So I always had what you would call a side hustle.
Yeah.
Just to supplement my income. So I've always been in business for a long time. I've been in business as well as being in the police. I've been retired from the police for a while now. So I've been in business for 15 years probably.
Okay.
Self-employed. And I was in a business network, and we used to, I don't know if you're in any networking groups, but we used to meet in this particular network. We used to meet once a month. And because of the lockdown, it went on Zoom. Strapline 2021, you're on mute. So we were on this Zoom call, and there were probably 25-30 people on that call. And I'm in a very privileged position, I think, because I have a police pension. So while I might live in poverty with just a police pension, in reality, my business income is bonus money.
Yeah.
But people in business, can be really tight. And we had a lot of people on this Zoom call who were very frightened, very stressed. They were going to lose their businesses. They have, shops, cafes, they have staff. And at the beginning, we didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
We didn't know what the next 2 years was going to look like.
Scary, wasn't it? At the beginning.
It was mad.
Yeah.
So they're very stressed. People on this call. And there's me. I'm sitting. My business used to be face-to-face, but I actually always had it on a Zoom call, or frequently had it on a Zoom call, because the business I have, I wanted my friends and family all over the country to benefit from what I do. So I would quite often do my appointments on Zoom.
What do you do?
I'm a utility warehouse partner.
Okay.
So I have energy, broadband,
Okay.
So mine was already, actually, when we went into lockdown, my business doubled in the first lockdown, because everybody wanted to talk. Everybody wanted to, because they didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't want to spend that more money than they absolutely had to. It's like that now. I couldn't have predicted how mad it would be with the energy.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm on this Zoom call. People are panicking, and I said, right, we don't know what's going to happen, but what can you do now that you don't have to go to work. Think of something that you want to do that you've always put off, because when you're self-employed, you know this, you do more hours.
Yeah.
Don't you? Like, we're sitting here, it's 7:30 at night.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I'm used to that, having worked shifts for many, many years. I don't mind. I can sit on a Zoom call at midnight. I don't care.
Yeah.
But most people work sort of 8-ish till 6-ish.
Yeah.
Don't they? When you're in self-employed place, you don't. You're like crazy.
It's your baby, isn't it?
Well, isn't it? It's your vision. It's your vision.
Yeah.
So I'm on this call and I was like, what are you going to do? And it was like, well, I'm going to learn to crochet. I'll get YouTube videos. I'm going to learn to crochet. And I was like, another one was like, well, we're allowed to go out for an hour. I'm going to go walking. I'm going to do some Nordic walking. I'm going to get fit because I normally sit on my backside all day or whatever. And other things and things and things. And they said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I've got this book in the back of my head. And it's been there for about 15 years because I can see a pattern because of my background in domestic abuse with the police. I see a pattern. And I want to teach people that pattern so that they can stop domestic abuse at the beginning. Because you don't get into a relationship that becomes abusive. You get into a relationship with somebody who is going to abuse you, but you don't know what you're looking for at the beginning.
Yeah.
You don't know what those red flags are.
No.
And I've got this book in the back of my head. I'm going to write the book. A month later, I'm back on that call with the same people in the same business network. We're still in lockdown, and it's like, well, what have you been doing? What's going on? How can we pivot our businesses to do? Can you do it like this? Can you do it online? Yoga teachers online. And then Joe Wicks picks up and does it for free. What the hell?
Yeah.
He did it for nothing. I'm like, what are you doing? You're putting people out of business. Anyway, different conversation. And then they said to me, how's the book coming on? And I was like, because I've got ME, I was like, what book? And I'm looking through my notes. Looking through my notes from the previous meeting. I was thinking, did I write? Oh God, I said I was going to write a book. So they kind of bullied me, and they did. Yeah, because accountability, and when you're self-employed and you're hanging out with other self-employed people, they really do hold you accountable. You do. Like, it was a Monday morning, used to be a Monday morning, like, what are you going to do this week? What are you going to do this month, at the beginning of the month?
Have you done it? Have you got it done?
Have you got it done? The three things, So then they had obviously started talking, these people who know other people who know other people. And then I started getting messages saying, hello, I heard you writing a book about domestic abuse, because my plan was to write, I wanted stories. I didn't want statistics, because the idea is the book is written for a 14-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be preventing it. There's loads of great stuff out there about how people have survived abuse.
Yeah.
Some great supportive literature. But what I want is, don't get into it in the first place.
The preventative stuff.
The prevention, the prevention. So my kick is all about prevention. So it's targeted at 14-year-old girls and their parents. So I started getting messages. I've been in an abusive relationship because I thought, if I can tell the story, and then I can flag up the red flags.
So is it fiction then? No,
it's real.
Oh, it's right. Okay.
It's 5 true stories. I picked 5. There are gaps. There are lots of women who came to me and said, please tell my story. And I said, well, okay, but when they start writing it, it's very hard.
Yeah.
It's very emotional. It's real. They've got children.
Yeah.
Some people have been nearly murdered.
It's huge. And then it's then going published with that story. I mean, there are 5 stories in there. They're all anonymous, but they are true stories.
And I
Right.
said to the ladies, write me about your relationship from the moment you met. So from the moment you met, and there's a red flag in half an hour, really,
Yeah.
which is terrifying, because even I didn't think it would be that quick.
Yeah. And you know, there is.
Yeah. So what I've done is I pulled the stories. Sorry?
And I was just saying, and there is as well, you know, if you don't know how to spot these early, and there's so many early red flags.
Yeah, so many.
If you're not aware of how to spot them, or don't know what what they may be, you just, you're going to be prone to then get,
But you know, there is a pattern. There is a pattern.
Yeah.
And the pattern is speed, going fast, getting involved, seriously involved very quickly. I want to have your babies. Let's move in together. Let's buy a car together. I want you, be mine. I want you to have my babies. Speed. Isolation, getting you away from friends and family.
Yeah.
Things like, your mother doesn't like me. Your best friend made a pass at me while you were at the toilet.
Yeah.
Isolation, getting you. So yeah, you just, you and him.
Yeah.
And stalking behavior, wanting to know messages all the time. And it's a pattern.
Yeah.
And if we can teach teenagers and parents, teenagers, the pattern, what to look for, what the parents need to look for, because the isolation is real. He comes in, you've known him 6 months, 6 weeks, and he wants to get engaged.
Like, well, the performance that we watched today, Red Flags, it was, they literally moved in together 3 months, and it starts with all the love bombing, doesn't it? And then
so all of that needs to be taught in schools, and that's where we are at the minute. We need to be teaching that in every single school. Every kid needs that book. Every parent needs that book. Every professional needs that book.
Yeah.
Because I've had women who worked in, and this is a word, right? I was at a conference in October with Clearpath UK, and Claire, who runs Clearpath UK, which is a domestic abuse support kick.
Yeah.
She said, and I heard some stories that day, but the worst sentence I heard that day was the domestic abuse industry.
Wow.
Industry. And I nearly fell off my chair. And I was like, oh my God, it is. It's a bloody industry. How horrible is that?
Yeah.
So every professional needs to read that.
Yeah.
You need to see it and stop it before it starts. In the police, they have a term, it's called target hardening. So for example, the best way I can explain it is, you've got a house and a house next to each other.
Yeah.
This house has got a dog. This house doesn't have a dog. This is a burglar. Which house is that burglar going to burgle? The house without the dog or the house with the dog?
Well, clearly without.
Yes, because the one with the dog is target hardened. It's hard for the burglar to target that house because of the dog. So we'll target that house, which is not target hardened. I want to target harden teenage girls so that when somebody comes along who is going to abuse them, they can't, because that girl will see what's happening and go, hey, mate.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also need to teach boys, we need to teach boys what is appropriate behaviour, because we don't do that either.
Yeah.
We teach boys.
It's actually to be allies as well for women,
Absolutely.
To be allies.
They are not all men abuse.
No.
But the majority of abusers are men, and we can't escape that actual fact. So we need to look at what the problem is. The problem is men who are abusive, because men who are abusive towards women, towards children, and towards other men.
And animals.
And animals. Well, that's what the huge red flag. There are a couple of things in the book that it needs amending. I need more stories. One is cruelty to animals.
Yeah.
The women who had experienced that and who were going to write for me couldn't. It was too heartbreaking for them to put themselves through that process.
Yeah.
So cruelty to animals is a big red flag. So if you're watching this and you've got a kid who's pulling the wings off flies, that kid needs counselling.
Yeah.
Because that is the thin end of the wedge.
Yeah. And you're right, you know, like it can be all these small traumas from your childhood can then build up.
Yeah.
And then it can become more and more and more traumas that you hold within your body, and you've got to be able to release them or understand how to release them, because then you're going to be prone to abuse, because you're an empath, you're a codependent, you've not learned how to deal with traumas, and so you're open to all these abusers.
If you come from a background where trauma is normal, you will trauma bond and you will have a relationship that is traumatic because that's your normal. And everybody's normal is different. I mean, you know, like every family's got their own crazy little quirky things and their own language. But if you grow up with parents who were swearing at each other and hitting each other and
that's the normal.
That's normal. And you grow up with this I don't know, it's like a toxic buildup in your body, isn't it? Like so many people are ill, physically ill, because of emotional trauma. I mean, that's a whole different realm to look at.
You just hold it in your body because you've no idea that you're from childhood right up.
If you've spent a childhood where you've been hyper vigilant, if you've spent a childhood where you thought, well, I will stay small, I will stay quiet because that's what keeps me safe. All that trauma is going to be held within you. Absolutely. And when people say to me, oh, but children are resilient, that's nonsense. Children are not resilient. Children do not have a choice. They are traumatized and they stay shut up because they haven't got a choice. They haven't got an outlet because the people who are supposed to take care of them are giving them the trauma.
So what next? What next for Rie Pearson? What's on the cards?
I'll tell you what's on the cards, right? Workshops for me. I've already set up a members group. I do workshops every couple of months with a lady who is called Sally, who is an emotional freedom technique practitioner. Because just as we were talking about trauma, I do, Sally and I do a week of workshops online. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can join us. And I do, it's like backup good cop, right? I do the domestic abuse stuff. It's for women who have been in abusive relationships, because strangely enough, if you've been in an abusive relationship and you've survived it, the chances are you'll get into another one. Because the love bombing from this new guy makes this guy, who's an absolute, he looks lovely, but actually he's just sucking up your vulnerability. So that's what we do. We talk to women, and I do the morning workshop. You don't have to, it's a Facebook or it's WhatsApp or whatever. So I do that workshop, and then Sally comes along with the emotional freedom technique and the tapping, and she takes the trauma out, because I couldn't have women who I've had this workshop with sitting with the trauma inside them, because it literally causes illness.
It does cause illness, definitely.
So Sally is she brings the relief of the trauma through the EFT practice.
Okay, talk us through a little bit about, for the people that don't know, what are EFT and tapping?
Well, emotional freedom, I suppose it's like a neuroscience, isn't it? You'd have to get Sally on. She'll tell you about it, all the stuff behind it. But for me, it's just a way that if you've been traumatized and you need to process those emotions, because we're taught, just get on with it, stiff up a lip, and all emotions, whether we call them positive or negative, whether it's happy or sad, and sad or angry isn't necessarily a negative emotion. It's just an emotion. And if you're sad and angry because you've been abused, you're absolutely justified.
Yeah.
You're absolutely justified to be angry.
Yeah,
but you need to get it out.
You need to sit with it as well, don't you? And just feel that. And
you need to feel. You need to feel it.
Yeah.
You need to allow yourself, and we provide a safe space for people to feel all of those emotions and get those emotions out. So you're not sitting and building up fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, like joint pain, muscle pain, because this is massive. It's massive now for women.
Yeah.
You know, how many women do you know who've got fibromyalgia? I know so many. I didn't know any when I was 18.
I didn't even know it existed.
It wasn't a thing. It wasn't a thing. But I tell you what's really interesting, if you look at it historically, a lot of women get put on antidepressants.
Yeah. Yeah.
So back in the day, my mother's circle, a lot of those women were on antidepressants. And when I was in a previous marriage, I had 2 small children. I went to my GP and she prescribed antidepressants.
Yeah.
So 6 months in, I was like, they're not working. I still feel the same.
Bring it up, isn't it? It's not looking.
I still feel the same. So I went back to the GP and I said, I know what I've got to do. I'm not depressed. I'm just married to an arse.
Yeah.
I need to get divorced. So I did.
Yeah.
So I did. It's terrifying.
Any form of tablets is a blanket. It's about what's underneath, you know, getting
what's underneath, the
root of the problem, you know. So do you know what? It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Rie.
Thank you so much.
Any last things that you want to say before we go?
There's so much to do, but I'm really, really committed to this vision that I have where people will know what these red flags are, and we stop teaching our boys, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Let's just stop doing that, please. Stop doing that.
Yeah.
Because that might be okay if you want to pass your driving test, or if you want to get a job, if you sit in an exam, try again. But if you ask somebody to have sex and she says no, don't try again, leave it alone. And actually, I've got 2 sons. And I teach my sons, you need to get a resounding yes, please, before you go anywhere near.
Yeah.
Because you need to protect your boys as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yes means yes. And you need an absolute yes.
We need to teach young people these signs of red flags. It's just so important, isn't it? Totally, that is the most important thing. Yeah. Because you don't then live a lifelong journey of trauma
and recovery. So let's stop having to need the recovery, and we're never going to catch everybody, but we need to stop the ones where we can. Because somebody said to me, well, what about this? And I'm like, oh, I have to start somewhere. I have to start.
And even if we get the one person, for me, you know, even though I'm doing this podcast, even if I can support one woman,
absolutely,
through the podcast,
one life makes it worth it.
You know, it was before.
Yeah. Exactly.
Thank you so much, Rie.
Thank you. And thank you for your podcast. I have been listening to the ladies on your podcast. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Let's stop that. Let's stop that happening.
Yeah. It's been an absolute honour and a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you do.
I'll never stop. I'm going to have to come back round a couple of times.
Bless you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.